All right, the people have started to join in. Where let's initiate. There are a lot of people who are returning back for the part 2, and there are some new, fresh participants here. We all know, though, for those who joined us in the part 1, they know Mr. Irfan Miraj and his background. I'll give a little bit brief. Irfan Miraj is the manager for FNS, University of Toronto. His main field is hazardous construction materials. He's an expert of his field in the relations of occupational and environmental health and safety. And this is part 2 of the session, which was the inaugural session of NESPA trainings. I'll now hand over it to Irfan Saab. Sir, the mic is yours. We're starting at 27. At 20, yeah, I think it's with 30 people down the line today. I think we're experiencing a little bit slower internet issues. But should we begin? It's 10:05.
Yeah. So I think I am on mute. Am I muted
No,
or?
no.
Okay.
We can listen to you
All
loud,
right. So,
loud and clear.
oh, okay.
All right.
So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome back. This is the part 2 of our occupational and environmental health session training. So, thank you for taking your time to attend this. So, just a recall of our previous session. We discussed that health and safety is an internal responsibility system. Worldwide, it's known as IRS, where it's a responsibility of everyone: employer, managers, supervisors, workers. The employer has a general duty to take every reasonable precautions under all circumstances to protect the workers, control the hazards, provide training to the workers, provide proper PPE, and establish SOPs or work practices. Whereas the workers have general duty to work safely, use proper precautions, use the PPE that they have been issued, and report any hazard, any dangerous work-related situation to their supervisor. And common controls that are recommended for any hazard in workplace. Number 1 is elimination. Physically remove the hazard. Don't let it stay there. Substitute the hazard, like replace with any other suitable material. If a certain chemical you know is hazardous, look for substitution and replace it. Then comes the engineering control. If we don't have any substitution options, then we need to provide engineering controls, which is providing barriers, providing isolation, and especially providing ventilation, which is, of course, would be negative air pressure where the workers are working. Administration control is more or less like change the way people are working, move somebody to an evening shift, move somebody to another room, another building, and then, of course, provide the protective equipment. And we also discussed the workers' right to participate and right to know, right to refuse work, and right to participate. Number 1 is through the Joint Health and Safety Committee members. There are certain categories of these. If a workplace has 1 to 5 workers, then no Joint Health and Safety Committee is required. And then 1 member, 2 members. But if a workplace has designated substances, this is a word which is used everywhere in North America, Europe. Designated substances are the substances which are known or highly suspected to be carcinogen, which can cause cancer in humans. So any workplace, so Then 1 to 5 worker rules may not exist because this designated substance will be present in every building of almost. And the members are both management and workers. So there are 11 designated substances in Ontario. So these, third one, benzene, is common. It would be in fuel storage tanks, especially the gas stations. We talked a little bit about phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, which is done for any property that is close to gas stations, and gas stations themselves have to conduct phase 1, maybe every year, I guess, where the consultant have to see if any oil has leaked into the soil. And when any adjacent property has to be excavated, phase 1 has to be done. And then if required, if the data shows that there are chances of any contamination in the soil, then they go on to phase 2, which is soils testing. And if the contamination is beyond the limit, then phase 3 means you have to excavate and remove the soil, dispose the soil appropriately. So benzene is somewhat included in our buildings because we have lots of fuel storage tank, especially with the emergency generators. Our buildings, most of them, they cannot work without emergency generators, especially the buildings where research work is happening. But these other designated substances are more or less related to the workplace where they are used or manufactured, or which have the factories where these things are manufactured. Lead in paint, mercury, we discussed last time as well. Mercury, usually should be present in any lab. People have been working in those labs, and the mercury gets trapped into the drains, which, let's say, P-trap, in other words, so it does not flow with the water. If you open a trap, the mercury, it might be sitting there for the last 40 years. We have found mercury penetrating through the floor tiles, and sometimes we have removed the floor tiles and found mercury underneath. Silica is common. Any concrete, any sand, any cement related products would have silica. Vinyl chloride, again, it's related to the industrial workplace. Asbestos is the bigger one. Asbestos, or you can pronounce it as asbestos, both are correct. So, and when my role at the university is basically in a kind of a in-house consultant. So the regulations about designated substances are very strict. We have to have a report at tender stage. Whenever the project is sent out for tender, detailed report on designated substances has to be part of the tender. So that's what we prepare, the designated substances report, and our report basically investigates these 4 major, because other products or materials do not apply to our buildings. And lead, mercury, silica, asbestos, usually on construction projects. So I showed this picture. This is the city of Asbestos in Quebec. There is also a city in Russia. They call it Asbest, A-S-B-E-S-T. But asbestos, when it was discovered, it was actually called a miracle material. It was something new for the world, especially the North America countries and Europe. It was used in almost everything due to its properties: incombustible, excellent thermal and electrical insulator, acoustic properties, high flexibility, very much resistance to acids, bases, and friction. Early uses, which is like before the World War II, it was used even in life-saving equipment. It was used in 5 blankets. I still have, I mean, not these days, but almost 10 years ago, we used to find 5 blankets in our buildings. They were asbestos containing. Fireman coats, respirator filters, actually the material that is prohibited these days, you cannot inhale those fibers, were used in filters, gas mask filters, industrial labs, industrial lab and gloves, those thick gloves. You can put those gloves and put your hand in a kiln, take out anything at any temperature, they would not burn and your hand would not burn. They are so good. And one of our colleagues is actually an artist, he retired. He's my customer for lab gloves. Anytime we find lab gloves, he has to have it. So we give it to him because he uses them. This is how an asbestos mine looks like common. It's simple, a mine, they just mine it and sell it. Another view, this is, I think, in Russia. So it exists in fibrous, natural form and mineral silicates of magnesium and iron. I know asbestos is not used in too many materials in Pakistan, but still it is being used. I'll come to those uses later on. 5 micron or greater in length is considered an asbestos fiber. And it's 700 times thicker than a human, thinner than a human hair. So you can imagine, you can't see that fiber. It's completely invisible. It creates problem when it gets to your lungs. And in Ontario, any material that contains 0.5% by weight is considered asbestos containing. In USA, some states have 1%. I believe Europe also has 0.5%. So 0.5% is more stringent, I would say. No country has less than 0.5%. But the irony with this is this used to be 1% in 1978, when the regulation started. It used to be 1%. And some buildings which we think were constructed in an era where no asbestos should have been used, people did use asbestos containing materials which were 0.7%, 0.6%. So those materials are now a problem for us because now the limit has been reduced to 0.5%. Biggest producers, and these are for these current days, Canada, America, South Africa used to be the biggest producers in up till maybe 2000. But these days, Russia, China, Brazil, and Kazakhstan are still mining, still selling this asbestos. Major users are USA, India, and Russia. USA they don't use in building materials, but they used in some manufacturing filters, which no other material can be substituted. So they use in those filters. India and Russia are typical users of this. Asbestos, where it's used commonly, number one would be sprayed fireproofing. As you would appreciate, more of our structures here, building structures are of steel. So steel columns, steel beams, we have to fireproof them. So this is the state. On the left side, the picture is a fireproofing, which is asbestos containing. Right side is wool-like, used to powder form with your hand pressure. This is when completely removed from the beams and columns. And once everything is clear, these beams are resprayed with non-asbestos materials. Another use is thermomechanical insulation in mechanical rooms, mostly at bends and at fittings. Straight runs, the picture on the right side is the typical corrugated sheet, asbestos containing. And the picture that you see on the left, you will notice that elbows are a bit thicker. So the engineers would recognize why insulation is required, or thick insulation required on elbow, because of the energy losses. So elbow, if you see a bulging thick elbow, that means it's asbestos containing. But as I mentioned in my previous session, that this insulation, I did find this insulation in Pakistan in an industrial plant which had boiler. So they used asbestos insulation. Another view of a boiler room. So these tanks are typically insulated with asbestos. So it was used basically to reduce the thickness of the insulation. With fiberglass insulation, you might have needed 3 inches thick, but with asbestos, you can do with a lesser thickness of insulation. Now, picture on this left, lab equipment. This Bunsen burner, I think everyone would remember this from our FSC chemistry labs. We used to use these Bunsen burners. So this white thing on the wire gauze is asbestos, 100% asbestos. So we have been using this. So it might be in our old college's lab somewhere, because we still find it here. But the new Bunsen burners, I think they come with the ceramic base. And then the other 2 pictures are of an oven from a physics lab, let's say, or a chemistry lab. So ovens would have lining of asbestos. And the third picture is actually the gasket in that door, the oven door. So other lab equipments, fume hood. On the left side, fume hood, again, you might have seen in chemical biology labs. This is where experiments are done. No chemical is allowed to escape this fume hood. There is a negative pressure. It has its own exhaust, but you would appreciate that the chemical spill on the sides are protected by that gray asbestos transite sheet. And on the right is the countertop. It again is asbestos transite. Very hard, very durable material. I mean, they are removed because renovation is being planned. Otherwise, they can still stay there forever. And some of our labs get 90% renovated, but they don't remove these fume hoods because they are in working condition. And then why spend money on replacing something that's in working condition? Transite ceiling tiles and transite, these are more or less for acoustic purposes. Picture on the left is a library, which has, the entire library has these transite ceiling tiles. So it provides a sort of a sound barrier. And then the other one is in a hostel, it's a phone booth. Of course, if somebody is talking on the phone, other people would not be able to listen that. This is, I think, India or Karachi. This is the low-cost housing, or where we use corrugated sheets which are asbestos containing. Vinyl floor tiles. So it comes in 12 by 12 or 9 by 9 size. 9 by 9 sides were used maybe until 1980s. They definitely contain asbestos. These are not ceramic tiles, which we use in Pakistan. So these are vinyl tiles. They are about not even 1/4 of an inch, very thin, but very strong. And these buildings this particular building was constructed in 60s. So imagine these tiles are still there. Thousands and thousands of students have gone through these classes and corridors, but nothing happens to these tiles. People do ask me, why was asbestos used in tiles? I said, this is the reason. They are staying there because it's asbestos. Otherwise, I give them an example of our lunchroom, my office, which was renovated in 2007, and we had to replace the lunchroom flooring after 4 years. And the traffic is what, maybe 40, 50 people on that floor, because asbestos was not used in the flooring. These tiles in our old buildings are still there. Ceiling tiles, lay-in ceiling tiles, 2x4, 2x2, they contain asbestos as well. Fire-rated doors. Again, some of these doors do have stickers on their side that this contains asbestos. Any door that has a sticker of fire rating, we suspect that there would be this type of infill material that's shown on the right. So you open that lock and we can see this 2 inches or 1 inch thick layer of asbestos infill, because it's a fire rated door. It's a fire exit. Other uses is in plaster. So plaster, as I said, they reduce the thickness of application. In our buildings where we don't find asbestos in plaster, plaster thickness is usually more than 1.5 inch. When they started using this plaster, the thickness reduced to maybe 3/4 of an inch. So that was why it was used in plaster. Roofing paper, again, it's not used. Felts, shingles in Pakistan, it won't be used. Drywall also is not very common, I guess, in Pakistan. I don't know. These days, it's a gypsum board, comes in 4x8 sheets. So when you join them, it leaves a gap. So that gap is filled with drywall joint compound, which contains asbestos, because they had to fire rate that opening. And it's very common in our old buildings. Texture or stucco finish that contains asbestos. Brake pads in our cars, that's definitely in Pakistan also, that would have asbestos. Not the new cars, but old cars with brake pads. Asbestos was definitely used in those brake pads. Acoustic paper, it's normally in our lecture rooms, behind wood panels or behind fiberglass panels. So just to reduce the echo from the professor or the lecture rooms. Window, door, caulking, where the ceiling comes. I think I mentioned last time that we have never seen, or it was never mixed with concrete, because concrete has enough properties of its own. But when they joint precast concrete panels, they use this as a filler material. Coating on masonry walls. Gaskets. Gasket between flanges, gasket in mechanical equipment, electrical equipment. Lamp wicks. So our old lamps, the wicks, which looked like canvas, that 1/2 inch width, it contains asbestos. Hopefully these days, but if it's coming from any country that is still using asbestos, they might still be asbestos containing. But these things do not cause or do not pose any hazard to us, because we are not disturbing. It's burning, it will burn, and without any issues. Vermiculite and talcum powder. Vermiculite is, I remember in 80s, some people started building houses with 9 inches wall, and then they used to give it 1.5 inch, 2 inch gap, and then another 4.5 inch brick wall. And that 1 inch gap was filled with either wood dust, newspaper shreddings. Over here, some buildings were filled with vermiculite. Vermiculite is like a very coarse sand material. Asbestos was not mixed with vermiculite, but unfortunately the vermiculite mines and asbestos mines were relatively very close, and they had contamination, especially the vermiculite that comes from state in USA, Montana, that definitely contained asbestos. And in 60s, the government of Ontario actually advertised vermiculite to be used as insulation in houses in the attic. And once this is determined to cause cancer, 5 years ago, the government paid those household people to remove this insulation. Everyone got like 7 to 8, 9, 10,000 because it was very expensive removing this sand. Talcum powder. Again, talcum powder is same. It's the mines are contaminated with asbestos. So this is last year's news. Johnson & Johnson baby powder. They recalled 33,000 bottles of baby powder because asbestos was identified in the samples. But Johnson & Johnson again took samples from that entire batch and proved that it wasn't in the entire batch. It might have been just a chance in 1 or 2 samples, but however, they recalled all that batch. But this baby powder issue comes up every 5 or 8, 10 years that they find some contamination in this. And this, I think this is common in Pakistan as well. It's not that we should stop using that, but just an information. If there is any substitute to talcum powder, we should adopt that. So as I said, it's a known carcinogen, which is a cancer forming or causing material confirmed in human beings. Inhalation is the major route of airborne asbestos exposure. You have to inhale on that, and they think that ingestion is also a problem, and skin contact, but it's not, it hasn't been proved. The only proof is don't inhale the asbestos fibers. So mesothelioma is the disease or the cancer that it produces. A very rare cancer, it has a latency period of 20 to 40 years. So that's why the workers who worked with asbestos industry in the 60s were diagnosed with this cancer maybe in the 80s. That is the reason why it took the world so long to ban this, because it started using in 50s, but nobody knew until 20 years when those workers started showing the symptoms of this disease. So asbestosis is not cancerous, it's just a lining of lungs, but that too is caused by asbestos. Mesothelioma is almost result of asbestos exposure. But the real issue is latency period, because somebody who is exposed to asbestos will show symptoms after maybe 15, 20 years. Again, asbestos management, which is done here, it's required under the law. You don't have any choice. You have to know where your asbestos containing materials are, maintain those records, maintain reports, notify every person in the building that there is asbestos in so many locations or so many materials, provide training to the staff who work on those materials, and then removal is a separate procedure. There are type 1, low risk, type 2 is moderate risk, and type 3 is the high risk. And every abatement work has to be notified to the ministry. This is Mardan, a person. I had another picture inside that room where those corrugated sheets were stacked, but he is working on transite, cutting the transite without any procedures. The kids are standing right beside him. There is a fan which is in opposite direction. It's actually, if he runs that fan, it will blow all the dust, all the fibers towards him. The protection, somebody has told him that you need some kind of protection, but the cloth that he is using will have zero protection. It will protect him from the particles which normally get out of our body through natural means. But this asbestos fibers, as I said, it's so thin, you can't stop it unless you don't have the proper respirators. Again, these are the corrugated sheets. So the workers are wearing some kind of mask or some kind of cloth, but it's useless. And on the contrary, the person who is making these sheets has this kind of protection. People who are removing that material, this is a transite sheet. You can see just the corner has been broken. It's a low risk. I can open these sheets because they are usually screwed on without any protection. The regulation says you don't need any protection. But since there are always chances of breaking these sheets, so imagine the amount of protection that these workers have. So they are fully protected. In case anything happens, any release of fibers happens from this. This is another level of protection. So you can compare the protection that our countries have and the protection that these workers have here. This is that raw asbestos, crushed, some cases crushed to use in floor tiles or plaster. But I showed you that removed fireproofing, it's exactly the same thing when removed. So when they apply, they put some bonding material and water and they spray. But when you remove it, it looks exactly like this, just fluffy cotton-like or material. But this worker, I mean, I can't comment what he's doing or what kind of protection his owners or supervisors have given him. And same material, if it's fireproofing, this is the protection for the worker who is removing that fireproofing. The respirator that he's wearing supplies air through a battery. So it's a battery operated. It's not like the ones which were here. But this is a battery operated because it's a high risk operation. This is usually an enclosure, we call it an enclosure or a work area where asbestos has to be removed. Every corner, every wall has to be properly sealed. And these units are, these two are negative units, so they provide negative pressure can escape this room. So the air changes are one air change every 15 minutes. So that's how they calculate the area, the volume of the room, and then they put these machines according to the CFM of the fans. And these have, in between right here, are the Hepa filters, the real Hepa filters. And normally in your building material stores, you would see so many vacuums would say Hepa filter, but those are not Hepa filter. So once this setup is done, they'll start removing these ceiling tiles, lights, grid, everything, and then they reach the fireproofing, start removing those. This is definitely Karachi shipyard wreck area. These ships are loaded with asbestos. Their outer filling is asbestos. They have boilers in the basement. They have asbestos. They have pipe insulation. Every room has fire-rated doors filled with asbestos. But they send these ships over here to be demolished. So I wish I could spend some time in Karachi and get the data from hospitals, from the government hospitals, because they definitely have cause of death. There would be so many people with lung cancer dying in this particular area because they have no awareness. And definitely they would not be throwing away the removed materials. They would be reusing them without knowing what they are doing and without knowing which material they are using it in. This is a big industry both in India and Pakistan, the shipwreck industry. And this is, again, I guess, India, which is asking Canada, the province of Quebec, to stop sending asbestos. So they do have awareness. They can 100% use asbestos, but they have to follow the procedures. Until 2004, these governments of the government of Canada had the excuse that they are exporting asbestos because the other countries have complete procedures in place. Because when they are shown the procedures, the books would say that these are the procedures that we follow, but you have seen the pictures that how much procedures are being used and nobody is caring about those workers. So I think going back to our general, let's see, any questions on asbestos, because we won't have any asbestos slides. No? Okay. So for construction business, occupational environmental health or health and safety is important. It saves lives. It reduces injuries in workplaces, helps your business grow, reduces direct indirect cost related to injuries, because if there are injuries, you will have direct cost related to that injury to the worker, to pay to the worker, and indirect cost in the form of time losses. Lost time injuries, quality of work, it saves you from inspections, audits, fines. Retention, the skilled workers are retained. You are not likely to lose them, and hire new workers and retrain them. Your organization skills will improve. The company overall will have a positive image. And again, now some of the shortcomings in this, in application of occupational and environmental health policies. Sometimes companies' procedures, they don't have any consideration of health and safety. Sorry. General culture of the organization and your workers' morale. We should do things properly. Workplace, any workplace, provide proper procedures, training, education to the workers, provide them with the right tools and challenges. Sometimes there is a constant change in site conditions and people just ignore, or people forget to use those procedures which have been written. Some projects, especially the construction projects, have time restraints. There are pressures to finish the work. Workers' ability to communicate, which is an issue here because there is so much workforce that comes from countries on work visas just to work, and they have no understanding of English. So any training that's provided to them is sometimes in their local language. But when they are on site, the client, the consultants, they can't communicate properly. Different trades. On a construction site, you would have masonry workers, you will have steel workers, plumbers, welders, fitters, electricians, and multiple operations, especially if it's a building project, you will have multiple operations in a building. So the supervisor has a challenge to look after every trade. That's why how the system works here is that every trade is considered as a subcontractor, and that subcontractor supervisor has the responsibility of their workers. Human factors, I mean, some people would just ignore or are not ready to follow any procedures. These, no doubt, these wearing respirators, wearing hard hats, shoes, those white Tyvek suits are hectic. Once for the last 4 months, every one of us has been using those masks, and you would have felt how difficult it is to breathe. After maybe 15 minutes, it's uneasy. So those masks are relatively easier because you don't have any filters, it's air going in. But with these respirators that I showed you, it is really very difficult to breathe. So the workers who are using those, they usually have a break after every 3 hours or 4 hours. And most important is the company's safety culture. Does the company want this health and safety procedures, these procedures to be applied to their sites, or are they going to just ignore? Yeah, this is a saying that safety culture is described as a set of beliefs, norms, attitude, roles, and social technical process which seek to decrease the possibility of exposing the workers, managers, customer, general public to hazardous condition. So that's why it's the broader subject of this applies not only to workers, but to all occupants of a building. Speaking about safety culture, now again, as I said, picture on the left, these people, they know that they are in a of falling materials, but the protection they have invented, I would say, would it save them from anything? I don't think. So why can't they be given hard hats? And then picture on the right, this actually I have witnessed on one of my sites as well. This rebar person or the scaffold or the shuttering person, is no protection, no scaffolding, he's just hanging by that column. Another one, I mean, you can see what's happening. They have supported a large boulder with two bamboos. So is it going to protect that worker if it falls, or is that support is enough? So these are minor things which a supervisor or the project manager should look after and take care. Again, some barriers. Corporate culture, is the organization ready to adopt this health and safety culture, or do they think it's a burden or it's an expense for them? Sometimes people do think that there is an overemphasis, trainings, and people get fed up of those trainings, and then they kind of just ignore those. Worker support and compliance. I mean, you are all experienced with construction sites. Sometimes you provide everything to a worker. He would not use those hats. He would never use eye protection. He would never use hard shoes because they are difficult to use, but the message that has to be transferred or given to those workers is that it's in their own benefit. And of course, all these PPEs, they would reduce the progress. So does the supervisor want progress, or can he give a 15, 20, 30 minutes break to workers? I think they would say no, the progress is important. And retraining of existing staff, they don't think it's important. The organization people think that they have been trained enough, so they sometimes would miss the new procedures or new SOPs to be transferred to the old workers. And experienced workers are always overconfident. You must have heard that term. I've been working in this field for 30 years, for 50 years, so I don't need any more training. I don't need your advice. So we have to technically tackle with those workers. And whoever is the health and safety professional or supervisor or manager, it's the walk the talk, which our religion also tells us, like, do whatever you preach. So have your safety, or supervisors should be wearing or using all the PPEs before advising their workers. I remember I used to work in a plant in Lahore, and that safety officer was something. I mean, he used to cause work stoppages on any minor thing. A worker not wearing hard hat, the entire day's work was, he just said, go home, no work today. Minor mistakes, and the work was stopped. But then one day I saw him, he left the office and he was on his Vespa, he turned right on the road, which was incorrect because there was no U-turn in front of that plant. So I took a picture of him. And next day I printed and I told him that, look, this is your picture. This is what you all day, all you know is how to stop the work. But when it comes to you, you are not following any safety procedure for yourself. So again, do whatever you preach, have your PPE or use your PPE before advising other people. Some benefits, again, if we adopt health and safety policies in our organizations, we will have good reputation, we can compete in the market. Cost versus risk, I mean, risk of work stoppages, injuries, lost time due to injuries, they get reduced. Quality of work will definitely improve. Productivity, ultimately, once the workers are trained and they would know how to use these PPE, the productivity will increase because they'll be getting appropriate breaks in between the work. Efficiency, again, same thing, will improve. Morale of the workers, if they see that nobody is getting injured on work sites and the company is taking care of them, they'll help out during their work. Access to global markets, because the global markets do emphasize on health and safety. So any contractor, any consultant who has these policies, of course, will get good marks or good reputation, and they will be able to compete in the industry. This happened in 2009. So after all this, I mean, don't assume that everything is 110% correctly done in these countries. Human beings have the nature of cutting corners. But the problem is over here, the repercussions are so severe that nobody dares. But sometimes people or contractors do make mistakes. This hanging swing scaffolding, it just snapped right from the center. There were 4 workers. They might be standing right in the middle of the scaffolding, not tied to any hooks. The scaffolding is still hanging, so that means the roof anchors were good. The roof anchors were holding this scaffolding. The other thing is that roof anchors, it's a building code that roof anchors have to be verified by a professional engineer after every 2 years or 3 years or before use. But this supervisor may not have provided proper training to his workers. They were not tied to anything. So all 4 of them died. And the manager got 3.5 years in prison. 2016, the case was finalized. But for the first 3 months, 3 owners of this contractor, they were in jail. So again, it might be a rush, 24th of December, Christmas evening, they might be rushing to complete this job because they might be taking earlier day off. Next day was Christmas. And this is what the Ministry of Labor then, if these things happen, these are the fine, $175,000 fine to a concrete manufacturer because one of the workers died and some were injured. So that's the kind of fines that are imposed. And recently, this jail term was introduced that either the owner of the companies or the supervisor, project manager will be jailed. So I think we are almost at, and workers' health and safety is not a cost. It is an investment. For contractors, it is an investment for their companies because they will be getting benefits from when they apply these policies. Okay, basically our session is over. This is just for those people who are in profession or who want to pursue the career of this health and safety, or your kids, your loved ones who are here, who are struggling or who don't know which direction to go. This industrial hygiene or health and safety profession, most of the people, they don't know that these professions do exist. And as I said, because of the policies, because of the regulation, almost every office, every industry will have a health and safety. So lots of jobs. And the fastest way to get to this profession is doing a master in public health. So my program, when I started, it was known as Masters in Health Sciences, but because I was part-time, so by the time I was ending, which is 2010, they switched to Master Public Health. But I preferred health sciences, so my degree is health science, but worldwide it's public health. So that is the fastest way. And the prerequisites are, this is just for information. If any one of you interested, mostly for younger people or any kids, any people who have kids here or relatives, or just to guide them. So if you have a 4-year bachelor degree in biology, chemistry, physics, engineering, industrial hygiene, then you can get admission in this program. Other than that, if you are not qualified or you are not able to get admission in master's program, there are colleges who provide diplomas in industrial hygiene. It will take you maybe 5 or 6 or 8 years more to reach the top, but you'll reach there. ABIH is the American Board of Industrial Hygiene. So when people are experienced in this field, they apply for that certification, and that is the ultimate certification in this field, CIH, Certified Industrial Hygienist. That's from America. In Canada, it's the CRBOH, and it gives you a registered occupational hygienist, which is equivalent. Mostly people like to have CIH because it's worldwide recognized. So industrial hygienist is somebody who would know everything, who would have information on laws, health and safety procedures, and this other important is airborne contaminants, values or threshold limits. So the person who can discuss, who can write reports on that, has to be a CIH. There is only one Pakistani right now who is a CIH. So he's my friend, my ex-colleague, and we actually started preparing for CIH together, but then I just backed out. I don't want CIH. But he wrote that exam successfully. So that's, I mean, some of the information that can be passed on to people who want to have a career in this industrial hygiene or health and safety. So these are good programs, and they pay very well. Within 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you reach a relatively good position. But initially, you might have to lift sampling equipment, go from one site, second, third, fourth, do air sampling, learn what the threshold limits are, and then focus on your job, and then you would reach there. Some useful sites: the American Council of Governmental Industrial Hygienists. So you can click on this website. You will find all the programs, so many training, so many short courses for any laws, any programs, or any building laws that you need to get advice on. Go to Ontario's e-laws. So you can find those regulations there. Our university's website is also good, Environmental Health and Safety.u Toronto. So you can find so many programs: heat stress, cold stress, how to do shift work, how many breaks do people need when they are working in a hot condition, welding procedures, painting procedures, what precautions are required. And this ACGIH also issues a booklet every year, which contains the TLVs, the threshold limit values for all the contaminants. Like threshold limit value, people would know, is the maximum value to which a worker can be exposed for 8 hours, 5 days a week. So they issue a booklet of every chemical, every contaminant. So that's a good guideline. So to members, it's free. They issue it every day. Yeah. So I think that is the end. You can contact me for any how to do in this particular career.
Sir, Irfan sir, thank you very much, sir. It was a very illuminating lecture. We enjoyed ज़बरदस्त किस्म की चीज़ें, information, और ख़ास तौर पे जो मतदान की तस्वीरें और पिशावर की तस्वीरें हैं, ये these are very common. But and of course the shipwrecking industry is so big in Pakistan and India also. But unfortunately, I don't think we actually understand the situation.
I tell you, you may get a huge project of low cost housing, where the design would say use corrugated cement sheets. So your project managers, people should be aware that using that sheet is not a problem. But if you start cutting them, creating dust particles and fine dust without wetting agent, without any vacuums, that would be not recommended.
Right. I'm sure. But I guess we need, we need a governmental kind of a policy also. Somehow it should be, I don't know how to do that. It's maybe government to government, some sorts of policy decision. How do you manage? I mean, you send it as policy apni koi bana ke aap bhejte hain, you send it to your government?
No.
As
The policies, no. The policies are governments. There, as I said, there are regulations.
No, like you said recommendations.
No. Regulation, the laws. Let's say if I'm doing a project which is, say, $1 million asbestos removal, I would not write a detailed specific. I do not write. I know consultants, they just copy paste from the regulation, but I just tell the contractors follow type 3 procedures as described in the laws. And this is the number of the regulation or the act. Just follow every procedure. So the laws come from the government, we have to follow. And then,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I was just finding out, some ways and means that how can we actually play our part in informing the government.
आपकी मिनिस्ट्री के पास already लिखे हुए होंगे. As I said, when the government of Canada were asked in the parliament that why are we sending asbestos to third world countries, the answer was that those third world countries have all the procedures that we need. So when we are importing asbestos, we have shown them that look, we use all the procedures or we follow all the procedures. So it must be written somewhere. We have to find it.
Right, I know.
Maybe with Ministry of Labor.
I guess so. But life is cheap there, so we can't really do much about it.
Yeah. So I can bet you if we look at the hospital data, there would be so many deaths in the 80s and 90s due to lung cancer. And they would never know that this is actually lung cancer caused by mesothelioma. Mesothelioma is something that if you have that disease and you can prove that you were asbestos worker in 60s or 70s, no second question asked. Your compensation, your family will get compensation for life because you won't survive after that lung cancer. It's a very serious. Recently, one of our contractors' son, he died, he was 40 years. He never worked with his father, with his dad. So that was a typical example of somebody bringing asbestos fibers on his clothes to his home. So the science is still not very sure, can one fiber kill? You can ask this question from anyone, no one has answer. Because those people who have this cancer, 99% of them have worked 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, full on in asbestos fibers. But somebody who has inhaled asbestos from his dad's clothes, he died, got that cancer, it's bad luck, I guess. He never worked in asbestos industry.
That's true.
We have 2 questions. What are minimum checklists for health and safety for a design office? What would be the minimum checklist?
For a designer?
For design office, for project designing and...
Project design would ultimately be converted to the execution of the project. So at design stage, if we are designing a new building, I think number one should be that the contractor should be asked that they need to give an undertaking that no asbestos will be used on this. I mean, things are coming from China, India, Russia. So who knows what material has been used? So can they get some sort of undertaking from the manufacturer that look, no asbestos was used in these materials? So that could be done at design stage to include that clause in your specifications. And then lead containing paint, it's overall in the world, it's no more used. But in older buildings, even in Pakistan, every paint would have lead.
Okay.
So lead does not have any written regulations as yet. It has guidelines. So guidelines means you have to follow the guidelines or prove that whatever procedures or precautions you have taken are enough for the workers not to be exposed. So basically, it's a law.
And in regards to workplace safety, how does workplace safety affect efficiency in the office? Because countries like Pakistan and third world countries, we consider that work safety and environmental issues might do they hamper the efficiency or do they improve in the efficiency of the office?
Definitely, if people are abusing these laws, it will hamper the efficiency. Like people going home from entire floor saying that we could smell something in the building. So what can you do? Are they correct? Are they abusing the clauses or the regulations? So in that case, it does. But if everyone is participating diligently, then I think one day the efficiency will increase because we will have the workers' morale will increase.
Then we have it's a longer kind of a question. It's a three-part question that you've given a lot of information on asbestos sheet.
Yes.
The questionnaire wants to know that is it prohibited or only cutting it or processing its processes or cutting it should not be carried out?
Again, as I said, countries like Canada, they banned asbestos last year. Okay. Before that, you were free to use asbestos, to produce asbestos. But on top of that, the laws are so strict that you cannot manufacture anything. If you are manufacturing a sheet with asbestos, it may cost you $20 a square foot. You substitute that material, use something else, you might get that material at $5 a square foot. So it's not prohibited. Go ahead, use those sheets, but help those workers, have some mercy on those people who are preparing, who are cutting those. Tell them, I mean, even if they are wetting, they have some wetting arrangement. Don't let the dust fly away. Put some exhaust fans. It was that person was cutting sheets outdoors, which is fine, but don't have kids standing right next to you. Apply some water, have some vacuums attached to your cutting equipment so that you can suck that dust and not allow that to spread.
Similarly, what about the indoor air quality? Because NESPAC, we feel a lot of engineers are asking this question, that everything feels compromised because carbon footprints are there and there is a building syndrome as well available. So what would be the optimum air quality standards required in a building of 2,000 people, where 2,000 people centrally conditioned building would be?
The basic indoor air quality, which we talked about last time, is those 4 parameters: carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, temperature, and humidity. That controls 90% of the complaints. Dryness, headaches, dizziness. So that's the basic tests that every consultant would come in and do and tell them that, okay, there are, I showed an example of a classroom where carbon dioxide was not being controlled. It was 4,000 ppm for 3 years. And ultimately, all we could do is reduce the number of students. The classes were reduced to 25%. So, but air quality is something which may not be defined. If somebody is complaining of any illness, then the best practice is to talk to your doctor, like what is causing you. Otherwise, in workplace, these 4 parameters are very common to be checked. And if you start checking everything else, then there is no end. What are we checking for? I mean, the consultant should have something to test for. They have to bring their equipment. So there are like 275 chemicals that can be tested, but you have to take maybe 200 samples for those. So those parameters are unknown, but these are very common. These 4 things, if we control that then 50% or 70% complaint should be reduced.
Okay, then we have a question that what is the safe quantity of all dangerous materials as paints and other materials in part of our daily life have those, especially in the construction industry. So is there a quantitative data related to it, or
That I said,
certain
as I said,
parameters?
the AACGIH, they issue a TLV, which gives you that quantity or that value that nobody should be exposed over that value. But for lead, I can say that it, again, because there is no regulation, 5 years ago, we used to use 5,000 parts per million of lead in paint as lead containing. These days, I'm using 1,000 parts per million. So any paint that has that much quantity is considered lead containing. So in that case, you have to have zero exposure for your workers when you are removing that lead. And for asbestos, again, it's a regulation. So there are so many other materials which are regulated. So the TLVs will describe that how much is or what maximum value you can expose your workers. Again, silica, grinding of concrete, grinding of masonry, grinding of mortar on construction site, at least use wetting techniques. Don't let the fine dust fly all over the place. And the mask or the protection that workers or these bystanders are using, it's useless. Those particles, if you inhale, will just cause uneasiness. It won't cause the particles that will cause damage to your lungs. You will be inhaling those and they would not come out of your lungs. The other bigger particles, they'll come out. So proper protection.
And are there any SOP requirements for seismic activity in a building, or
Oh no,
uh,
that's not health and safety, sorry. That is totally a
so
design
this,
question.
this is a design question.
I've engineering, I don't call myself an engineer now.
Well, this is a interesting view. If we there's a question, if we have option for glass wool or rock wool for insulation, which one is better regarding health issues? That's, I think, more
Current,
of a design
I
question.
tell you, currently, both of them are fine. They have some skin sensitivity, so you have to have some kind of protection, gloves, eyewear, and some respirator. You don't have to go that far with the quality or with the type of respirators, but don't let those particles. It's a skin. They do cause skin irritation, and some people over here are saying that in another 30 years, when this asbestos issue will be gone, people will start researching on man-made materials, which is fiberglass, rock wool. So maybe in the next 50 years, people would say these are cancerous. Who knows? Nobody knew in 1950 that asbestos will be cancerous. So, but these days, fiberglass, rock wool uh, is being used as insulating material.
The last question is that in regards to contractors, they don't implement the FIDE conditions of safety rules and regulations. Is there, for example, in a country, we want to learn from your experience that in a country like Canada, is there an implementation body or a regulation body that ensures implementation by the contractor of all the safety guidelines given provided by the consultant, or the FIDIC, or regulations, other regulations?
Health and safety is a law. So you don't need to tell the contractor what to do. Contractor, as I said last time, is the owner of the site. His supervisor is the king of the site. He knows his responsibility under the laws. He has to implement. The specifications or the contract document just tell them that these things have to be followed or these rules are to be followed. We don't tell them, or the consultants are not the site owners. They don't tell them how to use this. They just tell them that these are the rules. Please make sure that your staff and you follow these rules. And they have to follow because the Ministry of Labor is always there. You, as a client, as a consultant, we can call the Ministry of Labor against that contractor. And you saw what the ministry does when they are on site.
Okay, I think the questions are done, and it was absolutely wonderful session. Just a small comment to all participants that they can send their performer for training evaluations. I'll hand it over to Omar Farooq Saab. He can have the last words. Thank you, Irfan Saab, for your time and
Thank you very much.
energy. And a lot of you people can have Irfan Saab's email. He's already shared his email on the screen, irfan_miraj@hotmail.com. So if you guys need to don't bug him that much, but we
No,
can
I'm
disturb
always
his time.
available to help, especially as I said, if people actually, they do not know that this is a career. I didn't know that. I, by chance, got a job with a consultant when I landed here within 10 days. And my friends, they kept asking me, come back to highways. There are so many jobs in highways. I said, no, this is a field which I very quickly determined that if I am focused, I will at least be something. So within 4 years after consulting, I got this job, and then I did my master's. And there was a reason actually when I had only professional engineering or PEng on my business card. Anywhere we used to go in the buildings, because we own F&S facilities and services, we own our buildings. So people used to say, because you are from F&S, you are trying to save money. You are not telling the correct things to us, or you are lying. At least now, especially those professors, research people, when they see this master's in health sciences, at least they realize that he has some qualification. So it helps. So these are some programs which people don't know. And there are so many jobs. All you need to do is focus, get the right program. There are colleges here, and especially in these days when your kids do not have to come here, everything is online. You can get your certification sitting in Pakistan, and then go step by step, one certification, third, and then ultimately is the CIH.
Done. Omar Saab, you want to say the last words, closing remarks to this session?
Irfan sir, thank you very much, and all participants. Please, we're very happy that you've done good job. 60 plus in part 2. We've had a great team together. Hassan and Abdurrahman, we are doing well, and hopefully we'll keep seeing you guys in lots of these kind of sessions, online sessions. और इरफान साहब को हम फिर दोबारा लेकर आएंगे in 2 months or 3 months time, inshallah, with something new and something informative, inshallah. So thank you very much, everyone. Irfan Saab, I'll keep in touch with you. आपके साथ मैं अभी भी फिर भी करेंगे, and we will have certificates for all of you also, including the participants. सारों को certificates भी issue करेंगे, hopefully very soon, inshallah.
Yeah, my pleasure. If you need anything, any SOPs, any programs, I know NESPAC, as I mentioned, Environmental Health and Safety website, they also have lots written on COVID-19. So although you guys have enough documents, but see if any document can help. There are so many programs there, SOPs. If you need any hard copies or anything that you cannot download, just let me know.
Right, sir. Thank you, and
thank you.
Bless you all, sir. Thank you. Bless you, sir.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you to the participants. We're signing out from NESPAC Trainings. It was a pleasure having you all aboard. Please send in your performers, and inshallah by next week we'll start sending over the certificates, the much awaited certificates. Thank you. Take care. Allah Hafiz.